ASGARD'S WRATH 2 is the full-fledged open-world RPG I've always wanted to play in VR.
If you've been waiting for years for $60 AAA titles to come to VR, well, the wait is now over.
And it's not just any game, it's an epic action-adventure RPG and the most massive Quest game to date.
I can safely say this sets a new bar for what I believe Quest users can expect to experience when they put on a standalone VR headset.
But it's also just one of the best RPGs in any perspective I've played in years.
Okay, is it really that good? I mean, luckily, if you bought a Quest 3, you get the game for free, so you can try it out for yourself. But if you're thinking about buying it on the Quest 2 for $60, or are thinking about making the leap to Quest 3 just to play it, you're gonna want to watch this video first. Because ASGARD'S WRATH 2 might not be exactly what you're expecting. You see, I was sold on this game as being this epic, action-packed story with deep RPG mechanics, true physics-based combat, fun traversal options, and an impressively long runtime that couldn't possibly leave me unsatisfied. What I found when I played was a jaw-droppingly epic opening hour, followed by many, many hours of wandering the empty desert, hacking away at the same basic enemies, and being locked in puzzle rooms over and over again. I can't lie, I was so hyped when this game first launched to all those overwhelmingly positive reviews because it felt like a victory for anyone who enjoys VR gaming and wants it to succeed. However, when I first played ASGARD'S WRATH 2 at launch, I only got 2 hours in before moving on to other games. Something about it just didn't hook me like most VR games do. But after finally returning to the game and playing for another 10 hours, I think I finally figured out why. So in this video, I'm gonna break down why ASGARD'S WRATH 2, for me, falls short of being a VR masterpiece, but why it still might be worth playing anyways. We're gonna cover the gameplay, the story, and the graphics in that order, but first, if you could leave a like on this video, I'd really appreciate it, and second, roll the intro. True to the hype, ASGARD'S WRATH 2 is certainly the most ambitious standalone VR game I've played. I respect the attempt to create a fully fledged VR action RPG that doesn't just feel like a glorified tech demo or a short-lived indie project. And nowhere is this impressive ambition and scale more apparent than in the opening hour of the game. After one of the coolest VR cutscenes I've ever seen summarizes the events of the first game, you'll almost be immediately thrown into one of the most cinematic boss fights I've ever experienced in VR. This is such an amazing first impression, one that appears to be promising more of these incredible action set pieces alongside high-quality storytelling. But then suddenly the game all but stops in its tracks to introduce to you a bunch of major mechanics. This is a reoccurring theme with this game. The pace of this adventure is completely thrown off as you're suddenly introduced to the central hub area, a bunch of new characters,
greetings,
and the optional roguelike mode within the span of a few minutes. The onboarding section of this game is brutal, at least for me it was. This being an RPG, a role-playing game, there are so many different systems at work that the game decides to teach you basically all at once, which is on top of you trying to still orient yourself with the story, this new location, and the new characters, and the surprisingly confusing user interface. After that really awesome boss fight, you might see this cool-looking lady show up and think that must be the next main quest.
I enjoy long walks through a battlefield at dawn. Or did. I'm tired. It's your turn to fight.
Okay. And then suddenly 2 hours later, you realize you've been grinding the separate roguelike mode and made no progress in the actual story. Which is what happened to me the first time I played, and it's basically why I stopped. But going into my second playthrough, I avoided this NPC entirely so I could actually progress through the story and see more of those cool set pieces, fight huge bosses, and meet interesting characters. Unfortunately, there was another 4 hours of gameplay before something really noteworthy happened. You see, even though this is an apparently 90+ hour game,
and even after more than 90 hours, I'm still eager to go back in for more.
It's not 90 hours of intense action and boss fights and story beats. It's probably about 10 hours of that and 80 hours of backtracking through the map because you can't find the quest marker, sitting through loading screens as you fast travel between worlds, and smashing your head against the wall when you're stuck on one of the many Gone Alter puzzles. I have a lot to say about those, but let's do this in order. In a world where I hadn't played Bone Lab, Blade and Sorcery, or Battle Talent, I might love this game's combat system, but to be honest, this melee combat has a lot more in common with Assassin's Creed Nexus than it does Blade and Sorcery, which is not a flattering comparison. You'll basically always be parrying enemy attacks while you wait for your turn to attack, and to be clear, this is not physics-based combat as we're used to. Your sword swings don't physically affect the enemies other than causing an animation to play and their health bars to diminish. You know how in Blade and Sorcery you can see the enemies reacting to you in real time? You can press your sword against theirs and push them around? Yeah, that's very different from the strict feeling animations found in ASGARD'S WRATH 2. There basically is no creative way to dispatch your enemies as they will always die in a preset animation. And unlike a game like Battle Talent, ASGARD'S WRATH 2 doesn't require you to swing your sword properly to cause damage. There's much more of a focus placed on accurately hitting weak points, and with no simulated weight to these weapons, this is a game that basically incentivizes wiggling your sword at enemies to damage them the fastest, or spam throwing your weapons at them since they can instantly teleport back to your hands.
Lucky I was here.
Oh, bro.
This combat system, and honestly the game at large, feels designed to be played seated, which for a game of this size kind of makes sense, but it makes no accommodations or options for those of us who like to play standing, which is definitely more immersive. And speaking of immersion, almost every action in this game feels automated or restrictive to some degree, especially anything that involves your feet off the ground. You're given such a range of abilities, yet are always restricted with how and when you use them. Sure, you can climb stuff, but only when there's specific yellow highlighted rocks or ledges. Sure, you can wall run, but only when the game wants you to and on those specific highlighted platforms. Sure, you can use your godly power to affect the environment around you, but only right next to these dedicated areas near god altars. As a result, everything feels like it's on rails with this game, like the developers don't trust you with the tools that they gave you. Weird comparison, but sometimes this game feels more like a scripted Disneyland ride than a game. To give the game some credit, there are some really cool abilities you'll eventually unlock that help diversify combat and traversal, like the sword whip, the shield bash, and an axe that freezes enemies when you throw it at them. But none of these do much to change how repetitive most of the encounters feel. Enemies always spawn in waves at scripted areas that prevent you from leaving, with their repetitive attack animations, and eventually these fights just feel like they're there to pad out your playtime. And speaking of extending playtime, let's talk about the puzzles. I consider myself decently smart. I enjoy the occasional escape room or brain teaser, but a few of these puzzles really stumped me. I don't know if that makes it a bad puzzle or a really good one, but in the context of this game, when it entirely prevents you from progressing and having fun with the rest of the game, it's a little annoying. There are just so many of these puzzles that feel like artificially contrived roadblocks in the story. They really just disrupt the pacing of this otherwise exciting game. Just know that there are tons of puzzles like these that you'll be doing, and it's the only way to progress the story. What's worse is that when you get stuck, there's no way to ask for hints either. So on multiple occasions, a YouTube walkthrough is the only way I was able to get as far as I did. Thank you, A Wolf in VR. Seriously. Because it's not just the puzzles that can be confusing, it's also the quest design sometimes. I am supposed to help that bird right there. but there's just a tiny little gap that I can't jump across. I can't dash across, I can't do anything, like, to get to it, even though he's right there. He's right there. Locate the source of the cries to render aid or end its pain. So, like, I can help it or I can kill it. My follower was like, he probably won't, heal unless he gets some food. So I was like, oh, that might be a cool little quest thing. Like, I'll grab some fried fish because, he's a bird. Do I have to, like, throw it at him? Does he not? One time I was barred off from the main quest until I could find someone named Bess and buy a trumpet from them. I scoured the desert for ages, thinking they must be near that quest marker that it shows me on the map. If only I could figure out how to get there. Eventually I had to look up the answer, and Bess was literally one of the first people I met during that brutal onboarding process. I just forgot their name because of how much other information I was trying to retain at the same time, and for some reason this is one of the only RPGs I've played that doesn't put character names above the characters so you know who they are. This is a small detail, but an essential one, especially when dealing with so many different names and locations. When a quest giver tells you to go find someone, and even when you find them it doesn't show their name, it's kind of a problem. And part of me thinks they don't have character names or even subtitles on by default because that might be immersion breaking to see floating text everywhere. But let's get one thing straight. This game is not trying to be as immersive as possible. The very concept of this game and the premise of the story feels opposed to you forming any sort of identity or connection to the character you're playing as. You see, you technically play as an unnamed fledgling god who allies themselves with mortals to achieve their own ends. And by ally with, I mean completely take over their body and use them like a god-powered puppet. From a gameplay perspective, this sounds awesome. A variety of playable characters with different abilities and a literal god mode that you can whip out for boss fights.
Stand with me. What is this?
Sounds really cool. Sounds fun. The problem is that you have 3 different bodies and no real connection to any of them. You have your god body, which is this blue body. It's just blue for some reason.
Why are you blue?
Then you have your mortal body, which technically there's 4 of since there's 4 playable characters. Then there's your god form, which is this huge out-of-body version of you that you use for puzzles. Now, if that sounds a little confusing, it is. Because technically you're only playing as the blue god guy and he or she never speaks. They have no character whatsoever. But the mortals you inhabit do have very defined characteristics since they talk a lot and comment about everything.
What is this rot dripping from above? I taste decay on my lips.
But that's not you talking. You're just puppeteering their body and those words are coming out of their mouth. It's a really weird setup and one that I can't really get immersed in. Most RPGs either have a specific main character or let you create your own. Both can be very immersive for different reasons, be it good writing or freedom of choice, but ASGARD'S WRATH 2 is constantly throwing you in and out of different bodies, which makes feeling present and immersed in the world pretty difficult for me. Seeing as I haven't finished it, I'm hesitant to give my thoughts on the story overall, but from the hours I've spent with the game, nothing managed to hook me enough to make this slow-paced journey worth the effort. If the combat were better, or maybe the puzzles less frequent, maybe the story would be worth seeing to the end, but knowing I won't get closure for another 80 hours or so is enough to turn me away. You can imagine how disappointing that is for me, because I've been waiting years for a VR game of this size to sink my teeth into. But this one just isn't for me, I guess. Maybe it's because I've never been that much into mythology or ancient gods. I always found their stories and struggles impossible to relate to, and here is no different.
I cannot see as much as I once did, but I see enough. And I now see I can do what my father did. Pass on what he taught and what I have learned. This fight will not be mine alone.
But if you're pretty familiar with the Egyptian and Greek pantheon, maybe you'll love seeing these representations of them. The character designs are pretty cool. But that leads me to my next point. You see, this is a sequel to a VR game that came out in 2019. And I mean, there's been tons of developments over the past 5 years when it comes to video game graphics, VR hardware, performance, so let's compare this game to its predecessor. So this is ASGARD'S WRATH 2, what you've been seeing this whole time.
Down you go! Must not falter! Foul beast!
And this is the original ASGARD'S WRATH.
This storm will not stop me. Don't seek to challenge me with this beast!
It is evolving, just backwards.
Look, graphics aren't everything. This is coming from someone who absolutely loved Zenith the Last City despite its graphical limitations. By the way, what happens to that game? But I have to be honest, for a supposedly AAA VR game, I kind of expected more, even from a standalone exclusive of this scale. The environmental textures leave a lot to be desired, and unlike most standalone VR games, the graphics aren't stylized enough to hide that lack of detail.
Brother, what's that, brother?
You see, the absolute visual splendor of the first ASGARD'S WRATH made even the most boring of tasks enjoyable to do in VR because of how marvelously detailed every item and environment was. But the significantly less detailed world of the sequel doesn't have that same effect on me. And I think the worst part of that is that the scale of this game is a lot less impressive when you can kind of see how it was achieved. When you're playing the first game, you're thinking, how is my computer able to run this? When playing this game, it's not that it's unimpressive, but the limitations are more apparent. Unlike what some reviewers have said, I doubt you'll forget this is a quest game while playing it.
I have had enough of you.
But that being said, that doesn't mean there won't be plenty of huge moments that really do impress you. You see, for all its shortcomings, everything I've said so far, I still think this game might be worth playing. And here's why. I've been playing this game while writing this video, and as you can probably tell, I haven't loved the game so far. Maybe it's the unrealistic expectations I had going in, or maybe it's that this genre of game just doesn't really work for me in VR. The user interface alone was almost enough to turn me away from this game. It seemed so unintuitive and clunky to have to pull out this menu of icons just to look at your inventory and quests, and pretty much every menu takes up the entire environment, making them feel completely unimmersive and almost difficult to see because you have to move your head around just to see a page's worth of information. But thankfully, I kept going, because eventually, you get used to it.
What's up, brother?
As you keep playing, the weird menu system eventually just becomes the menu, the awkward combat just becomes combat, and the frustrating puzzles, well, those are still frustrating, but you accept them. And if you keep going, this game does have some really cool stuff it wants to show you. I don't want to spoil too much, but these boss fights never disappoint. I do think it's a shame that it takes so long to get to those parts though. It feels like there's a lot of filler content here. But at the same time, I can't really be mad about that. VR games are known for being too short. As a community, we've been asking for more full-length, feature-complete games. And to be honest, that's exactly what this is. ASGARD'S WRATH 2 is the complete package when it comes to VR gaming. And while it doesn't quite nail the basics better than any game I've played, the combination of all its elements, the combat, the exploration, the impressive boss fights, and many challenging puzzles makes it one of the best reasons to consistently use your VR headset. What I've realized now 15 hours into the game is it takes a while to get going, but once it does, it's really exciting to know that there's so much more that this game has to offer. While I still find a lot of the moment-to-moment gameplay tedious, this game does have everything it needs to justify its $60 price tag. Just keep in mind that, to me, it feels like you're paying more for quantity than quality. There are so many dungeons to explore, companions to gather, bosses to slay, puzzles to solve, items to craft, and a decent story tying it all together. If you're pretty new to VR and won't notice a lot of the gameplay nitpicks I mentioned, this is a great way to first experience a lot of different VR mechanics, with a very gradual increase in intensity. And that actually makes a lot of sense. I think Meta knew that this game would be a lot of people's first VR game if it came free with their Quest 3 purchase, so it almost seems like the game was designed such that nothing too motion intense happens for the first several hours. This makes sense when you want to ease new players into VR, but again, for people like me who are used to moving freely in VR, this feels incredibly restrictive. But I will say, once I unlocked the sword whip and the companion that basically serves as a glider, I started to really enjoy the game more since it offered something more exciting to regularly do. Swinging and gliding through the air is obviously tons more fun than just running across sand and rocks. And I've heard this game reinvents itself several more times across its runtime by introducing these new playable characters and companions. Okay, that's pretty cool. That is very different. if you're looking for a game that has tons of content to keep you busy and you don't care too much about physics-based combat, ASGARD'S WRATH 2 might be exactly what you're looking for. But if you don't want to spend $60 or you don't like the idea of a slower-paced game, I'd honestly recommend Dungeons of Eternity. It's got all the melee action, dungeon crawling, loot gathering gameplay, but for half the price and with co-op multiplayer. If you want better graphics, freedom of movement, and a more concise story still on standalone Quest, then I'd recommend Assassin's Creed Nexus. And if you want more VR game recommendations, well, consider subscribing. Thank you for watching this video, by the way. I'm sorry if a lot of this sounded like nitpicking or complaining, but as someone who plays a lot of VR games and who had really high expectations for this one, these things were really noticeable to me, and hopefully some of you will relate and feel validated. Most of the coverage around this game has been overwhelmingly positive, so hopefully this video gives you a clearer picture of what to actually expect. Let me know down in the comments what your experience with this game has been like. Did you like it? Did you think it was overrated? Are you still thinking about trying it? I'd love to know. But that's all for now. I hope you have a great day. I'm Virtual Bro, and I'll see you next time.